What is up, guys, and welcome to another episode of Guarani Vision, the first ever podcast dedicated to Paraguayan football in English. As always, I'm Roberto Rojas, and joining me is my great co-host, Ralph Hanna, and here we are, guys, on another episode of Guarani Vision, right at the final day of May. We're obviously heading into June tomorrow at the time of recording, which means we're going straight into what's going to be happening with the Copa America, the international tournaments coming. Obviously, a lot of lists will be made. Danny Garnedo actually will announce his squad for the upcoming friendlies against Peru, Chile, and Panama today. We'll obviously talk about that next week. But of course, we still have a lot of, races going on here from a Paraguayan perspective. Obviously, we'll talk about how our Paraguayan teams fared out on the final group stage day of the Copa Libertadores and the Sudamericana. Who's alive? Who still has a chance? And, I think it's just, going to be really interesting how this all coincides with what is a really dramatic title race with 2 games to go, Ralph. And as I'm introducing you here, obviously it's crunch time. It's crunch time for these Paraguayan teams on all fronts. They kind of have breathed a sigh of relief in a way after a really long continental competition, but they still have to go at it in the Clausura with Libertad and Cerro Porteño fighting it for the way. But how are you, man? Here we are, already into summer here in the United States, or getting close to it at least.
Yeah. Hi, Roberto. Hi, everybody. I mean, we're getting into it. We're kind of on the brink of international season because we're talking about the Paraguay squad coming out later today. The first friendly is actually a week away today, but we've still got this title race to be decided. And the funny way it's working out is the title race gets decided on a Wednesday. This is like a whole long story of Paraguayan FA not being able to organize their calendar correctly. So we get this huge showdown. It's going to be on a Wednesday night, which is a bit of a shame, but I think it's going to be worth tuning in for because we're really neck and neck as we go into it. And like you said, it's been kind of a grueling Libertadores Sudamericana because it's just a lot of travel. Most of the teams don't have big squads. Everything in this last week, we just had like a lot of teams playing for something. So I think now the players are just trying to want to wind down, but they've still got these 2 huge league games coming up.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot. I mean, what do you expect from the Paraguay, from the APF? Like these guys can't even organize games ahead of time. They always do it like days before. So what do you expect them not getting their schedule right? But that's a whole different conversation as itself, because obviously, it is gearing up to what could be a decisive week or days, I guess you could say, in Paraguay, because obviously Cerro Porteño are looking for their first league title in nearly 3 years now. Obviously, Libertad are trying to continue what their dominance has been for so many years, you would say. And yeah, I think it's going to go down to those 2 teams. We saw Olympia lose basically their chance to go and be champions. So it will be down to 2 teams. But of those 2 teams, I don't know, man. I feel like it feels as if though people are tense in a way. Like I don't know if you've been feeling like social media, but I feel like for Seto fans, we'll get into a bigger discussion shortly. But just my overall perspective is like a lot of Seto fans really want this title. Like for a team as big as them that has gone, yeah, like I said, nearly 3 years. The last title was the Clausura 2021. Even that was in a dramatic fashion against Guarani, the famous 155 game. It feels as if those said they can't do it in the way that they want to. They always have to find a way to make things difficult and do it in the most stressful fashion.
Yeah, we have these short seasons in Paraguay, right, with the 22 games. And I think that gives you often the chance if you do get some good title races. Because now you mentioned that one. I think a year later, it went down to the last game of the season against Libertad, and it was Cerro Libertad playing each other, which Libertad ended up coming out on top. We've had Olympia when they won the title under Julio Cesar Cáceres. That was a really close race to the end. And now we've got, again, it looks like Cerro and Libertad could go down to the last day. So yeah, we do get some of these fun title races, and yeah, the pressure's on Cerro because it's in their hands, right? They win their last 2 games and they will be champion. But I'm sure we'll go into that in more depth. But maybe that's where the tense feeling is coming from the fans because they've just messed up a chance this week where all they needed to do was win to qualify for the next round.
And we'll go straight into that because obviously Cerro Porteño were playing for their kind of Copa Libertadores future as they took on Colo-Colo and what was going to be a decisive game in terms of how tight everything was going to be. So obviously Cerro Porteño went into this game against Colo-Colo and there was no score at the beginning, Ralph. There was no score at the beginning, but it was Alianza Lima who took the lead firsthand against Fluminense. They had to play in the Maracanã and Rio de Janeiro, which meant at one point Cerro Porteño was bottom of the group because of that. But it didn't go the way that Alianza Lima wanted to go, and it definitely didn't go the way Cerro Porteño didn't go, because obviously we saw Alianza Lima lose 3-2, which meant that Fluminense were top of the group. But it was an early penalty from Colo-Colo, from Palacios, from Carlos Palacios, a really silly challenge to really go through, that gave Colo-Colo the lead, but it came straight forward from Pachi Carrizo to score the equalizer. But then Cerro Porteño they kept trying to go on the attack, and they couldn't find the breakthrough. They couldn't do it. And ultimately, it meant their elimination from the Copa Libertadores because of the way that the group was stand. Fluminense was with 14 points. The draw meant that Colo-Colo was top, even though they were equal on points with Cerro Porteño. The away goals was given to Colo-Colo because of that. So that was a vital goal for them, the Palacios goal. And ultimately, Cerro Porteño will have to settle for the Sudamericana. Well, they will have to settle it for the Sudamericana, ironically being paid the final in Asunción. But it's kind of a divided, I guess you could say, fan base at the minute, Ralph, because obviously, many people really want the Copa Libertadores because it gives them such a financial boost, and I think that kind of missed out on them. But we'll talk about that in a second, but just what we saw on the pitch, because I think Manolo really set up his team in a weird way again. Like, you didn't see the best from someone like Juan Iturbe. I think it was kind of a suspect defense in a way. I mean, Alamendita's getting that red card. It was a funny moment where right at the end where the referee, Wilber Rondan, was actually going to VAR because they were thinking that there was a penalty shot right at the end, but ultimately it was because of Alamendita's red card because of a really, really dangerous foul on one of the Colo-Colo players. But just ultimately your thoughts on this game, what it means for Cerro Porteño moving forward, and just how they can assess this group stage as a whole, because I think they kind of feel disappointed, even if they are still with life in a different competition.
Yeah, I think firstly they are disappointed. I think as professional footballers, you always want to win and you always want to be in the top tournaments. Definitely the senior players in Cerro. Somebody like Turin, the captain, was talking about winning the Libertadores, not the Sudamericana. So I think for as much as now some people are looking at maybe there's a silver lining that there's an easier chance in the Sudamericana, which may or may not be true, I think the players on the pitch definitely wanted to win that game. And it was a strange game because at kickoff, it was Colo-Colo that needed the goal because they needed that extra away goal. If the game had finished 0-0, actually Cerro would have gone through on the whole way it worked out. But by getting that first goal, then it became a test for Cerro, who had to find 2 goals, and ultimately they couldn't do it. So it was interesting how the game kind of shifted in each team's focus and what they needed. But really, like you said, I mean, Colo-Colo were gifted that penalty. It was Juan Iturbe making the mistake more than Ronaldo de Jesus for me, because Iturbe gives him such a bad pass inside the box. He's like flat-footed, not expecting it. And so he ends up committing the foul on, I think, Paiva, right? On Paiva, the ex-Olimpia player who wins the penalty. And Iturbe had done the exact same thing playing for Paraguay against Brazil. I can't remember the exact year, 2016, 2017, where he gives the ball away, very similar in the final, his own third, and Dani Alves goes on and scores, and that starts a comeback for Brazil because Paraguay, I'm going from one team to another. Paraguay were winning 2-0 and they gave up the lead. 2016. Okay, that was the World Cup qualifiers. So we've seen that before from Iturbe, and it was Iturbe who didn't have a great game. So in the second half, when Manolo starts to make changes, he finally does gamble to bring on Aguayo, who's this such an exciting player who, by the way, I mean, don't count him out. Today, Garnero's calling his squad. Don't be surprised if somebody like Aguayo gets the nod from Garnero, because he's just playing so well at the moment, this young player. And so finally Manolo risks him because there's been 2 games where he hasn't put him on as sub. But surprisingly, he doesn't take off Iturbe. He takes off the goal scorer, Pachi Carrizo. And I think that was the wrong decision there. That was maybe where he thought Iturbe might give him more on the break because he is faster than Carrizo. But Cerro lost a lot of control. And I think it was around the 70th minute of that game. I was watching it. I was watching it with my wife, and I looked at her and said, they're not going to score. And they didn't, because by that, Colo-Colo were able to kind of shift it. They didn't need a goal, so their whole way of playing had changed as well since the opening stages. And we just saw the game fall out at that 1-1. Sure, Cerro had those late penalty shouts, chances where they're throwing the ball into the box. But that was really, just those last minute kind of Hail Marys. In terms of building up and structured the game, you never really saw them breaking down Colo-Colo. And that was a big problem for Manolo this whole tournament. He hadn't got, I don't think Cerro scored more than one goal in a single game, and they weren't able to do it again today. And that's why they're playing Sudamericana instead of Libertadores second round.
Yeah, 4 goals, 5 goals against for Cerro Porteño, and it's really kind of fitting in the way that they play as well, that you kind of think like, is this really a team that was going to improve moving forward? I mean, yeah, obviously they probably would have the chance to probably sign some players and whatnot, but I think it was kind of I think it was disappointing. I think certainly some of the blame has to be given to Manolo because they started off so well. They got results against Fluminense, but just assessing it real quick as well, Ralph, you look at some of the games that they played. And they haven't been convincing in all of them, really. They got one win, and it was the one win against Alianza Lima, who are arguably the weakest team of the group, and it was in the last minute. So you kind of felt like this kind of it was gonna get worse. And yeah, of course, they didn't get eliminated. And I just feel like even if they were in the round of 16, they had to take on one of the bigger, stronger sides, that it was not going to end well. So you're not feeling that surprised either if you just assess all the 6 games and you think, is this really a team that can go far in the competition when you only get one win and it was in the last minute that you got your goal against arguably the whipping boys of the continent?
Yeah, and also, I mean, even for Colo-Colo who do go through, I think they're the first team that qualify with 6 points since they've had this setup. So I mean, both Colo-Colo and Cerro were not looking particularly good, and we'll see how far the Chileans go in the tournament. But maybe this will be the end of the road at this stage. And it's like you said, yeah, it was one win against Alianza Lima. It comes in the last minute. They lost the game away to Colo-Colo in the last minute. They drew with Alianza Lima away, where they all these games where you should be picking up the results. But ultimately, yeah, it's been a much more defensive setup in general. This last game was slightly different. The team was more attacking from the start. But it was a very much more defensive setup, not what we've seen in the league, where often Cerro can score 2-3 goals, and the football is a bit more free flowing. Obviously, the level of competition is different, but I just think we saw this. We'll talk about Libertad in a bit. That the managers trying to change their way they play in the Libertadores hasn't quite worked out for them. It's not necessarily a bad idea to try and play differently on the continent. We know, because it's a totally different kind of challenge. But the way it's been done by both managers, we haven't really. They don't seem to have found that kind of formula to work this out. And so, I mean, Cerro go to the Sudamericana, and they have a very difficult game because they're going to end up surprisingly, against Parananense from Brazil. So, I mean, having Brazilian opposition is very difficult. You never really know if you can go through over 2 legs.
Yeah, especially the Paranaense side that we'll talk about in a bit. They've kind of really did so well in the Sudamericana in their group with another Paraguayan team that we'll mention shortly. But I just look at Cerro Porteño, I just think to myself, and of course now they get the short end of the stick of getting I'd say a decent Brazilian side. I mean, I wouldn't say they're the strongest, but they're obviously a team that is worth obviously feeling a bit stressed about. But those are the games that you have to win, Ralph. Like ultimately, if Cedro do want to go far in the Sudamericana and strive to win it, they have to play these games. Like ultimately, like there are no shortcuts, there are no easy ties, and obviously, if you go far, taking against teams that have gotten difficult ties, it's almost as if, yeah, obviously you're getting the best of the best, you would say. So yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think for Cedro, I think hopefully this is a blessing in disguise for them heading into the Sudamericana, but they're not going to have it easy with Athletico Parananense. As we switch gears to what's happening in the Sudamericana, I mentioned that Libertad will also be playing in the Sudamericana. We had kind of already figured that out last week or a couple weeks ago. We still don't know who they'll be playing, Ralph, of course. They still have to figure out the final group, which will be with Gremio, who obviously had their games rescheduled due to the floods happening in their region. So at the minute, though, it could be Boca Juniors, which, having seen Boca in their group, they were with Trinidad. It's not convincing, nevertheless, but I mean, they haven't convinced in a lot of games so far, but they're still a tough team. They're still a giant of the continent, and I think Libertad do get them. I mean, they were able to get the win last night against Nacional, so that kind of boosted morale, and obviously all the attention is now given to what's going to happen in the Apertura race, them and Cerro. But if they do get Boca, it feels like they're not getting an easy break either. They get River and Boca at the same time this year.
Yeah, it's not an easy competition, the Sudamericana, and especially not with the way the setup is at the moment. We have these pretty big teams like you're talking about in the competition. I think what Libertad did well in the win against Nacional, which was their best performance so far in the Libertadores, is he finally started using some of his regular players. So we talked about this, having this almost this alternative team for Libertadores with Roque Santa Cruz and people. Well, he went in with Melgarejo from the start. He went in with Oscar Cardoso, who scores and becomes one of the few 40-year-olds to score in the Copa Libertadores, along with Roque Santa Cruz, of course, who's already done it. But that kind of slight change in team and using what I think is a stronger team from the start, obviously paid off for them. And it was particularly for me, Melgarejo, I thought was having a good game. He's involved in both goals. He sets up Alejandro Silva, but he's also involved in Cardoso and the build up to the Cardoso goal. So I mean, I think that was starting to show signs of what Libertad are capable of. And historically, when I look at Libertad, they don't always struggle against the big Argentinian teams. They've pulled off some good results, especially at home in the past. So we'll see if they end up with Boca, because like we said, things can definitely change. But I wouldn't necessarily count them out in that game. And of course, in terms of Boca against Paraguayan teams, there's some history there. Olimpia have a great history against Boca, and then you have, of course, the famous Capiatá results. So and Trinidad pushed them really hard this year in both games, I thought. So I mean, we'll see how that one plays out. But I think for Libertad, the important thing was Ariel Galeano starting to change his formation, and if he uses that in the next round, which is in July, so when he's got more time, players back from international tournaments, we might see a better Libertad in continental competition.
Yeah, and the same could be said for Cerro Porteño. Obviously, these games will be happening in mid-July, obviously at the end of the Copa America and a lot of competitions. So yeah, all the attention will be given to that, to Cerro and Libertad. And also, I think as well, like with the Olympics coming up, you have to see how many of those players might be heading off to Paris for the Olympics. So that could even, in a way, for both Ariel Galeano and for Manolo, I mean, they could also be with some weakened sides at the same time as well, Ralph.
Yeah, that's right. That's a good point. I mean, Cerro started, for example, with Peralta in that last game. He's almost definitely going to go. We talked about Aguayo. Maybe he ends up in the senior team, but then he could definitely be an option for the Olympics. In Cerro as well, you have Vieira, who's also a midfielder that could play Olympics. So, well, Jesus, who gave away the penalty. So yeah, there's actually quite a key like part of that Cerro team. And then in the case of Libertad, you have some players coming through like Villalba, who's doing very well at the moment. Lescano could play, so they could also end up sending players to the Olympics. It's going to be interesting to see for sure.
I can't wait for it. But one team that obviously has kind of made us proud as Paraguayan football fans is Sportivo Ameliano, because they went all the way to Curitiba on the final day with a chance to qualify to one of the stages, be it the round of 16 or the knockout round playoffs. And they got a historic result at the end. They got a 1-0 win over Athletico Parananense. So yes, Paraguayan teams can beat Brazilian teams, especially Paranense. So I hope Cerro Porteño can use this as an example for their next game. But it was a 1-0 win. It was a goal from Richard Torales in the 61st minute, which means that Sportivo Ameliano will be playing in the round of 16. They won't play till August, but I mean, this is a huge result for them, Ralph. Obviously, this is a team that obviously had been through quite some time, and really, if you look at it at the bigger picture, it kind of isn't surprising given how they've kind of done a lot of huge achievements, hazañas, as we say in Spanish, because obviously this is a team that's won the Copa Paraguay, they've won the Super Copa, they've beaten Olimpia, and in this group, they've kind of gotten the results that they wanted. I mean, Yeah, they couldn't beat Paranaense at home on the first day, but they were able to snatch results against Danubio and Zuliano, and yeah, I think it's just credit to what this team can do with Pedro Saravia, who obviously is a really good manager as a whole. I think it's a good sign for them, and I think it boosts them first of all financially, but also on a morale boost. That this is kind of the bogey team you would say that we've been used to in Paraguayan football. Now they're doing it on a continental stage. I mean, how do you feel? It's a huge moment for the team from Barrio Jara in Asunción.
Yeah, it's amazing, and none of us called it right now. We all thought they couldn't do it, and it was funny because even Danubio didn't beat Zuliano, so they they were actually gonna get through in terms of in second place, even if they didn't win this game in the end. So it was just quite funny. But by winning the group, I mean, it's a huge moment to go to Brazil. It's a team with Paranaense basically have like 10 times the squad value they do. They rode their luck a bit. I think Paranaense had 24 shots, but only 4 on target. So they really did. Sarabia is such a good defensive coach, so he does do that of making it very difficult for teams. There were lots of shots coming from out of the box as they tried to find a way to break it down. And then with their only shot on target, 2 substitutes as well, combining because you have the ball winner is a substitute, and I've just forgotten his name, but then he gives the ball to Torales, and Torales with that great finish. Freddy Vera, there you go. Freddy Vera was the one closing down, who's on loan from Cerro, so that's kind of ironic. And he wins the ball, gives it to Torales, and Torales finishes the only shot they had on target in the whole game, and they go and they top the group. And it's really special there's a group of guys called, and they always have a banner up there called Los de Siempre, and they're led by this guy, Silvio Sens. So I'll give a shout out to him. He was an ex-player for Ameliano in the 80s when they were very lower division. He follows the team everywhere. He was sending me photos from Venezuela. They went up there, and I saw them as the camera pans to the very few fans that went to Curitiba. He's there, and that's an amazing moment for those fans following this team since they've been in basically third division for most of their history. And now there's been all these moments with the Copa Paraguay, Super Cup, now the Sudamericana. To have this kind of possibility now to have an even bigger game coming up. Let's see who they end up facing. I don't think that's confirmed yet because you have to have the other rounds. But it's just a huge moment. And you said about the money as well. I think is it 5 million? I think it's about $5 million or 2 million. Sorry, no, I think they're 2 million. Cerro missed out on 5 million by not qualifying. But yeah, it's about $2 million. I mean, that's huge money for them. They don't have any players currently with a value close to that. The best players they have are on loan, as we just mentioned. So I mean, to get that kind of money is just really is a huge change for the club, and maybe it's something they can start to look at. Do they try and invest in their stadium? Because with all of this, they don't play in their home stadium because it's too small to be able to use for top division football.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's certainly going to be interesting, and I think for a lot of money that they've already gotten as well, winning competitions. I think it's still going to be interesting to see how they really pan this out, but we have to see who they face too. We still have to wait and see because obviously the way that the Sudamericana kind of is set up, obviously, uh, I think it's going to be interesting to see who they face, the draw that they can get. I think they kind of got lucky that they missed out on some of these teams, but it could even be Cerro Porteño. They could be Libertad. Can you imagine that? An all Paraguayan affair in the round of 16 of the Sudamericana.
No, but they want someone else. They want to go abroad. I'm sure they want to go to Argentina, back to Brazil. But yeah, it could happen. That would be a shame, I think, because we'd like to see them against another big team and see what they can do.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens because obviously the way that they're kind of dealing in the Apertura as well, they kind of needed this and they're still respectively in a position where they might do something in the Clausura and probably go back again as well next season. We'll see. We'll have to definitely see as we switch gears to now what's going on in the Apertura because we still have a race, Ralph. We still have a race for a champion because obviously when you look at it from a bigger picture, obviously these teams are really fighting to see who blinks first, because at the time of recording, Cerro Porteño are top of the group with 42 points, but one with the same points as Libertad, but plus one goal difference by Libertad, who are also fighting to get the Apertura title. Olimpia, as I mentioned before, are out of it. They have 35 points, but they couldn't get the results against Trinidense, a 2-1 win for them. A team that's kind of been dealing with Sudamericana as well, against a side that also, one, has a bigger budget, and two, is led by someone like Martin Palermo, and are not playing in competitions like the Sudamericana, which they got eliminated by Almeniano out of all teams. Yeah, I just feel in a way it's kind of an embarrassment for Olimpia to not be in this position now on the final two match days.
Yeah, Olympia's big moment's going to be that final game against Libertad, where basically.
Can you think about it? They can give Cerro Porteño the league title.
They're good, yeah. If they were to take points of Libertad, that guarantees Cerro. Pretty much guarantees Cerro the title. We just have to wait for this week's games. But yeah, that's their role now. Is just kind of as a spoiler, and they're not in the party on the final 2 days. And yeah, that's been very disappointing for them in terms of the way Palermo has tried to play. A lot of the games for me, it's been like it's almost been less tactical, very direct, and more kind of mentality, trying to instill that mentality. And it's worked in some games where Olimpia have scored these late goals, and they've turned games around. But actually against Trinidad, it backfired on them, right? And they ended up giving away the lead and giving away the late goal to Trinidad and missing out on their chance. And so it was Roman. Yeah, it was Roman in the very last minute who gets that winner for the team from Trinidense. And yeah, I just think, I mean, he's never really settled on his 11. I think he's obviously missed Richard Ortiz with a lot of injury. He doesn't feel Delis Gonzalez is 100% fit. So there's two key players for Olimpia over the last however many years he hasn't been able to count on. But then he hasn't really been able to find his right team. He gave Bruera a start after he's been using him off the bench, and Bruera gets a goal, and so he's starting to find something there, but he's still not playing Arrua regularly. They always seem to do better with Arrua. He doesn't like him, or he doesn't know how to fit him in with his team. The midfield's changing all the time. So I think with Olimpia, there's so many questions, and that's why they've ended up in third place. Maybe the good thing for them is that they don't have those competitions. They have a lot of time to work over the winter in Paraguay to get ready for Clausura and maybe try and mount a challenge. But definitely, like you say, it's been disappointing, and I think mostly because they haven't found this way of playing. They haven't found like a structure. It's just been very direct and very kind of reactionary to the opposition rather than them imposing their own style of play.
Yeah, I think it's certainly going to be interesting to see how they can fare it out next season. I think that's something of a make or break season for a lot of Olimpia players, the coach, Palermo, and many other involved in the institution. So gonna have to wait and see. But of course, we still have 2 more days to go, 2 more match days. And unfortunately, like you said as well, for those that want to go watch the Champions League final in Paraguay, and have a choice of saying, oh, okay, I won't have to watch the Paraguayan League. Well, you have your chance. So if you're not a fan of Real Madrid or Borussia Dortmund and you want to watch some Paraguayan football, you can do it, because there are games scheduled at the time of kickoff on the Champions League final, but it is not involving teams. So at least they got that part. At least the Paraguayan FA was smart enough to not schedule games between the two teams that are actually in the fighting, Ralph. So that's a plus. That's a plus
Not
at least.
smart enough. They're forced to, because Libertad played on a Thursday, so they had to play on a Sunday. They couldn't put them on a Saturday. So it's not even, they're just forced by rules. But yeah, it's funny that there's always games at the exact same kickoff time as the Champions League final. I always find that funny, especially for the players, because I know a lot of those players would want to be watching the Champions League final rather than playing a game that, looking at the teams, yeah, for some of them it's meaningless because they're mid-table. Nothing's going to change in the table.
Yeah, those games are Tacuary against Nacional, Sportivo Trinidense against Guarani, and then 2 de Mayo against Olimpia, which is happening after the final. But hey, they still got to prepare for all of that. But nevertheless, we have these two games. We have Cerro Porteño taking on Sportivo Luqueño, On Sunday, we have Libertad taking on General Caballero de Juan León Mallorquín. Obviously, two teams that have kind of really been fighting mid-table. In this sense, Luqueño have kind of got in the way. They've gotten some good results here and there. So they've been a team that's also been in the race per se. And then on the final day, we have obviously Cerro Porteño taking on Nacional and Olimpia taking on Libertad. So yeah, Ralph, here we are. The last two games of the season happening on Wednesday. As great as Paraguay is, everyone thought it would be decided on a Sunday, but no, because of how the rescheduling had to happen due to the Paraguay-Russia game that wasn't supposed to happen, we are getting a final day on the Wednesday. So how do you see it? How do you see it? I mean, certainly me as a Cedro fan, I feel optimistic that they can do it. I know I picked Libertad to win the league title, and I just don't see how Cedro will blink after the failure that they weren't able to get in the Libertadores. And like, okay, now they have to focus here. They can get two winnable results. I mean, Luqueño and Nacional are always tricky teams. Olimpia have to play Libertad. I think Libertad should do the job against General Caballero, but yeah, I mean, I think all of these games have the potential for a spoiler. So do you see any of that, or do you really see business as usual for both these teams, but it's ultimately Cedro that kind of fare out and become champions?
I think we're going to see a lot of ups and downs. Maybe the results end up being that both teams win all four games left, so 2 games each, and that would mean Cerro are champions because they have the better head-to-head record against Libertad. But having said that, within the games, I'm sure we're going to have lots of ups and downs. Of the 4 games you've mentioned, Libertad General Caballero for me is the most obvious home win for Libertad. I think that seems to be the easiest. I'd be very surprised if something happens there. Both of Cerro's games are tricky. Like you say, Luqueño are playing well. They're 4th in the league. If they were to win and Olimpia don't, they'd actually can tie 3rd. So, I mean, they're having a really good season for them under Julio Cesar Cáceres, who's an absolute Olimpia legend. He pipped Cerro to the title when he won it. Actually, I remember they had a really good comeback. If you remember, he really brought the team back. So, I mean, he's definitely could be a potential bogeyman for Cerro. So I think the Luque game won't be easy. And then Cerro's other game against Nacional, remember, it's the ex-coach of Cerro who they fired at the start of the season, Bernay. Nacional have been pretty awful. Their Sudamericana campaign was terrible. I mean, we didn't even talk about it because it's that bad.
They were in a tough group. They were in a tough group anyway when you think about it as well. So
I think they conceded like 14 goals, right? They really didn't acquit themselves well. If you think of someone like Ameliano as a contrast.
there you go.
So they've been playing very badly, but you have that Bernay chip on his shoulder, and Nacional traditionally do quite well against Cerro. For people who don't know, their ground is literally overshadowed by Cerro's ground. So when you're at a Nacional home game and you're in the main stand watching the players, you look up and you see Cerro's stadium towering above because they don't have a big stand the other side. So I mean,
and the funny part is this game's not even played in that area, so the Cerro fans won't even be at the game's actually in Ciudad del Este.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's the other thing. They've moved the game to Ciudad del Este, kind of to put Cerro off a bit, but also to try and get more money because that ground is obviously much bigger than Nacional's home ground. So you have all of that playing in for Libertad. Like we said, General Caballero, we think they can win that. And then the Olimpia game, it's really, who knows what's going to happen there because those two teams have a lot of bad blood. As much as Olimpia and Cerro are traditional rivals, more recently, the Olimpia-Libertad rivalry has been huge because you had the Garnero winning everything with Olimpia, which Libertad really didn't like. They took Garnero, they took Roque Santa Cruz to Olimpia, kind of, an Olimpia legend, and then the manager put them in Libertad. Libertad start winning everything. At the same time, Olimpia's then president is kicked out. And so there's a lot of tension between those two teams. And I don't think Olimpia want to go into that game without not doing anything else than trying to win it. So I think that's going to be a really tricky game. I don't know. Yeah.
I mean, ultimately, like when you look at it, No, but ultimately as well, I think the way that the format works for both the Apertura and the Clausura, I mean, they need to get the results needed because say they screw up in the Clausura in the way that they don't, that could these results, these games could mean them missing out on potential continental competition. So, like you said as well, like okay, they're kind of meaningless games in that sense, but for a lot of these teams, they know that and they're looking ahead, they're thinking, no, these are the results that if we screw up in the Clausura, that could be the chance of going into a Sudamericana or Libertadores or just missing out in general. So, no, I don't think it's in that context like meaningless in the sense, but you get what I mean. I think they need
Yeah.
to go in this game and feel like they need to get the results that they need, even if they know that they can't really win a league title. But they look more from a future standpoint.
Yeah, that's a great point. So obviously there's the Apertura, but then there's the Acumulativo, which is the yearly table, and the yearly table counts towards two things: relegation, which isn't a problem for these teams, but then also, like you say, the continental competition. So that's true. Every point does count, even though you might not be fighting for anything in your particular short season, your Apertura. Yeah, and I do think I'm sure Olympia will go out motivated, and so it is a difficult game for Libertad. I'll be interesting to see what Galliano does with his team as well. So we just said that finally he plays was what I would say was more of his league team in the Libertadores. Now he's got a game coming up 72 hours later, and then 72 hours after that. So he's gonna rotate somewhere. I'm just not sure where, and does he get that right? He's, remember, very young manager. This is his first big job. He won the treble, but he won the treble with a lot of the foundation was already there for him. This was his first kind of big test. His first, he took the preseason himself. He's doing everything himself now, so it is a big test. For Cerro, we've seen they're almost a bit forced with injury and with the fact that you're going to have to rotate between the Cecilio, Iturbe, and Aguayo. You basically between two of those three, and they rotate them around. And then in midfield, he's like Morel or Wilder Viero or Peralta, those three around the Pirista Mota, who's playing every game. So Cerro, there's not that much he will do. I mean, he will rotate, but we kind of know where it will come. With Libertad, there's like, almost every position is possible to play for. And maybe that kind of that unlimited choice almost is harder for Galliano to find the right formula. Yeah, it's going to be very tough. I mean, what I think we will see is they'll go into the last day head to head. I do think Cerro will just have enough of a Luqueño. Libertad will win. So they go into that last game, and then really anything can happen in those 90 minutes. And like I say, I'm sure we're going to see a lot of ups and downs within the games itself.
So let's do that. Let's do that because obviously goal difference is a big factor in this one. So how do you see the Cedro game against Lucania, the first game this weekend? Give me a result. I'll say 2-0 Cedro on this one.
I think I'll go 2-1. I'll go 2-1
2
Cerro.
1. All right, so that's +1 on that end. Libertad against General Caballero. I'll say 2-0.
Yeah. Yeah, okay, I'll go with you. 2-0.
So I'm trying to think right here. I mean, Cedro are still up even with the goal difference, so it doesn't
Well,
really
Cerro
matter.
up anyway, though, on head to head. Goal
Right,
difference won't come into it. As if they equal on points, Cerro are champion. So that's why it's in their hands if they win both
right.
games.
So looking at the final day, obviously two kind of derbies per se, Olimpia against Libertad. How do you see this happening?
Olympia 1-0.
Ooh,
Yeah.
okay. I say a 1-1 draw, which means what do you get for Cedro against Nacional? Do we see a 30, was it 35 now? 35th title if they win?
Yeah, it would be a 35th. And I think they get it, but they'll probably draw. I think they'll draw in Nacional. So I think Olympia end up helping them out.
And so that means Cedro would win the 2024 Apertura, their first title since 2021 and their 35th title overall. Obviously, a big achievement. And I think they're kind of closing. I mean, I'm trying to now look at what that would mean in terms of the overall. So, yeah, Olympia's with 46. So now the difference gets cut to 11 now. So, yeah, just right there. But ultimately, I think at the end of the day, we will have our deserved champions if it is Libertad or if it is Cerro Porteño. But I think for me, even speaking as a Cerro fan, even if I have to speak neutrally, I think this Cerro team do have enough and have demonstrated. And they beat Libertad as well. Like they were able to get the result that they needed against kind of the the other strong team in this kind of league race. So it's almost as if you have nothing to lose and you have a deserved champion at the end, Rob. So yeah, that's
Yeah.
what I think. I don't know what you think. Just your closing thoughts on this, if on what you feel, etc., are the potential champions of the Apertura.
Yeah, well, let's see. Let's see this time next week if we're right with our predictions. But I think the good point you made is that either team really would deserve it. 50, if anybody gets 50 points, it's like usually an out of this world season, which we've seen from Libertad recently. And we've had times where Libertad and Cerro have passed the 50-point mark. If they win both their games, they'll end up on 48. So they've both had very good seasons. It hasn't been that a case of, oh, no one really wanted to win it. You've had two very good teams going at it. Libertad, people have felt they're maybe not performing to the level of last year, but that's just because they've set the bar so high, winning the treble. So I mean, I think we've had a good season. It's very likely coming down to the last day. It's definitely coming down to the last 2 days. So I think we'll have an exciting kind of end to this, which is what we've deserved and what we've been looking for, I think, for a while with Libertad dominating the last year. They really did dominate. So it's good to have like a neck and neck race to start the year off.
Feels like the Premier League a little bit. I'm hearing all the words like you're saying, neck and neck, push them to the day, set the bar up, treble. I mean, is Libertad City and Arsenal Cerro Porteño,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
obviously in this case we get the opposite of what happened in real life for this season. So yeah, you see some of the parallels. I can see why a lot of these Paraguayan teams, a lot of these Premier League clubs want Paraguay because they see that's like, oh, how about that? Because I want to equate myself. So yeah, it's going to be interesting. I can't wait. We'll obviously talk about who is the champion next week. We'll also talk about who is in the Paraguay squad as we now shift our attention to the Copa America, the upcoming friendlies, the Olympics, all that coming up here on Guarani Vision. A lot of stuff going on, Ralph, and obviously with Fed and many others who will be involved. So can't wait for that as we close out another great episode of Guarani Vision. For myself, Roberto Rojas, and Ralph Hanna, thank you so much for listening in. See you soon.